Victoria Hammond stared at the text message that shattered her 23-year marriage in 9 words. I want a divorce. I've met someone else. Within 48 hours, Blake Hammond, the man she'd built an empire with, had emptied their $800 million joint account, leaving her with $17 and a maxed-out credit card, while his mistress, Autumn Sinclair, posted photos of a diamond the size of a grape on social media with the caption, "Finally getting what I deserve." What Blake didn't know as he drained every cent from their account was that his brilliant wife had just closed the acquisition deal of her career 3 weeks earlier. She'd bought Sterling Vale Bank, the very institution where he'd hidden his money, transferred the stolen $800 million, and secured loans against her name using forged documents. The bank he thought was his fortress, the bank where his mistress's father sat on the board, the bank that held all his secrets. But when the gilt-edged wedding invitation arrived 6 months later, embossed with gold letters inviting Victoria to witness Blake marry his mistress at the plaza, she didn't cry. She smiled, bought a red dress, and RSVP'd yes with 2 words. Wouldn't miss it. What was Victoria planning that made her accept the invitation to watch her ex-husband marry the woman who'd destroyed her family? What had she discovered in the Sterling Vale Bank's private files that made her blood run cold and her smile grow wider? And what did Blake and Autumn not know about the wedding venue, the bank accounts, and the federal investigators who'd received a very detailed anonymous package 3 days before their big day? Victoria Hammond had always believed in signs. 23 years ago, she'd met Blake at a charity auction where they'd both bid on the same painting, a turbulent seascape that reminded her of her father's naval career. Blake had let her win with a gracious bow, then bought her coffee to congratulate her. That coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into sunrise conversations on her apartment fire escape. Within a year, they were married in her parents' garden in Charleston, with wisteria blooming overhead and promises that tasted like forever. They'd built Hammond and Associates together from nothing. Victoria had the vision. She saw patterns in markets that others missed, could predict shifts in consumer behavior 6 months before they happened. Blake had the charm, the connections, the ability to walk into any boardroom and make people believe. Together, they were unstoppable. Their consulting firm grew from a converted garage office to a glass tower in Manhattan. They had no children, a choice Victoria had made after 3 miscarriages left her hollow and afraid. A choice Blake had claimed to support, even as she sometimes caught a flicker of resentment in his eyes when his brother's kids visited. The money came fast. First millions, then tens of millions. Then the kind of wealth that required private wealth managers and offshore accounts. Victoria handled the investments while Blake handled client relations. She'd trusted him with everything. That was her first mistake. Her second was not noticing when the late nights became a pattern, when the business trips stretched longer, when his phone started living face down on every surface. The text message arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, while Victoria was in a meeting with Sterling Vale Bank's CEO, Jonathan Reeves. She'd been negotiating the acquisition for 8 months. Sterling Vale was a mid-sized regional bank with excellent bones but poor leadership. It was bleeding money from bad loans and worse judgment. Victoria saw opportunity where others saw risk. She'd structured a deal to buy the controlling interest through a complex series of shell companies and investment vehicles. It was the kind of deal that required absolute secrecy until the moment of signing. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Blake's name. She almost ignored it, but something made her open the message. 9 words. 9 words that detonated her life. She'd sat there, staring at the screen while Reeves discussed earnest money deposits, and felt the world tilt sideways. She excused herself, walked to the bathroom, and threw up. Then she washed her face, reapplied her lipstick, and went back to finish the deal. She didn't call Blake. She didn't cry. She went home and finished what she'd started. That night, she found the apartment empty. Blake's closet was half cleared. His toothbrush was gone. He'd taken the photo albums but left their wedding portrait, a calculated cruelty. She sat on their bed, the one they'd picked out together in Copenhagen during their 10th anniversary trip, and opened her laptop. She started with their joint accounts. Empty, every single one. $800 million gone. Money she'd earned, investments she'd nurtured, profits from deals she'd structured, gone. She felt something inside her chest crystallize, turning from heartbreak into something harder and colder. She called her lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Volkov, who'd handled their corporate contracts. Patricia listened without interrupting, then said 3 words. Let's destroy him. The divorce papers came via courier the next morning. Blake was offering her the apartment, 1 car, and $50,000. For 23 years of marriage and half of everything they'd built. The papers cited irreconcilable differences. There was no mention of Autumn Sinclair, the 29-year-old marketing executive who'd been their client for 6 months. No mention of the affair that had been happening in hotels Victoria had paid for with their joint credit card. No mention of the lies. Victoria signed the papers without changing a word. Patricia looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Tori, you're entitled to half of everything. We can fight this. We can... Sign it, Victoria said calmly, and finalize the Sterling Vale acquisition today. I want it done before close of business. Patricia didn't understand, but she did as asked. By 5 p.m., Victoria owned Sterling Vale Bank. By 8 p.m., she was sitting in her new office, going through every file, every account, every transaction. She had full access now, CEO privileges, complete visibility into every deposit, every loan, every safe deposit box. She started with the largest accounts, working backward. She found Blake's money at 2 in the morning. He'd moved the entire $800 million into Sterling Vale Bank the day after he'd sent the divorce text. Not into a personal account. That would be too obvious. He'd created a corporate entity, something called Sinclair Development Holdings, and transferred everything there. He'd then taken out massive loans against that money, using her forged signature as a guarantor. The loans had been approved by someone on the board. Autumn's father, Richard Sinclair, it turned out. A neat little family operation. They thought they were clever. They thought Sterling Vale was neutral territory. They'd thought Victoria would never know. She sat back in her leather chair and laughed until tears ran down her face. For the next 3 months, Victoria worked like a woman possessed. She hired forensic accountants who specialized in financial fraud. She hired private investigators who could track a shadow through fog. She hired cybersecurity experts who could recover deleted emails from burned hard drives. And piece by piece, she built a case. Blake hadn't just stolen from her. He'd been stealing from their clients for 2 years, skimming money from accounts, falsifying reports, creating phantom expenses. Autumn had been helping him, using her access to client accounts to mask the theft. They'd planned it perfectly, or so they thought. They were going to take the money, start fresh, somewhere warm, leave Victoria with nothing. The wedding invitation arrived in June, cream cardstock with gold edges. Mr. Blake Hammond and Miss Autumn Sinclair request the pleasure of your company at their wedding ceremony on September 15th at the Plaza Hotel, New York. Victoria stared at it for a long time. It was a taunt, a final humiliation. Blake knew she'd have to hear about it, see the photos, watch him marry the woman he'd chosen over her. But inviting her directly? That was pure malice. Or maybe it was Autumn's idea. The mistress wanted to see the first wife's face when she claimed her prize. Patricia saw the invitation on Victoria's desk and snatched it up. You're not seriously considering... I'm going, Victoria said. Tori, I'm going, Patricia. RSVP, yes for me. And contact the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Tell them I have information about a major fraud case involving stolen client funds, money laundering through a banking institution, and interstate wire fraud. Tell them I have documentation, recordings, and witness testimony, and tell them the perpetrators will be at the plaza on September 15th. She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Tell them I'm inviting them to a wedding. The months before the wedding were busy. Victoria restructured Sterling Vale from top to bottom. She fired Richard Sinclair and 3 other board members who'd been complicit in Blake's schemes. She installed new leadership, tightened lending practices, and began the process of recovering the fraudulent loans. She also quietly contacted every client Blake had stolen from, showing them the evidence, offering restitution from her personal funds, and documenting everything for the federal investigation. Some cried. Some threatened lawsuits. All of them cooperated once they understood the scope of Blake's betrayal. She lost 15 pounds. She stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. She lived on black coffee and righteous fury. Her friends worried. Her mother called from Charleston weekly, begging her to slow down, to take care of herself. But Victoria couldn't stop. Every document she found, every transaction she traced, every lie she unraveled felt like justice. Not revenge, justice. There was a difference. She also shopped. She found the perfect dress in a small boutique in Soho, red silk that clung to her frame, with a neckline that was tasteful but memorable, and a slit that ended mid-thigh. She bought new heels, had her hair cut and colored, booked a makeup artist for the morning of the wedding. If she was going to attend her ex-husband's wedding to his mistress, she was going to look like a woman who'd won, not lost. The night before the wedding, she couldn't sleep. She stood in her apartment, looking out at the city lights, thinking about choices and consequences. She thought about the girl she'd been at 25, bidding on a painting she couldn't afford because it reminded her of her father. She thought about Blake's smile across the auction room, how it had seemed like fate. She thought about the 23 years between then and now, the life they'd built, the partnership she'd believed in. She thought about the moment it had all cracked open, revealing rot underneath. Her phone buzzed, a text from Patricia. Federal agents confirmed for tomorrow. Warrants issued. Timing is perfect. They'll move during the reception. Are you sure you want to be there for this? Victoria typed back. Wouldn't miss it. She slept for 3 hours and woke before dawn. The makeup artist arrived at 8. By 10, Victoria looked like a different woman. Polished, powerful, devastating. She stared at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the person looking back. Somewhere in the past 6 months, she'd shed her old skin. The woman who'd built a company with a man she loved, who'd forgiven his distance and his secrets, who'd chosen to believe the best in him, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone who understood that love without accountability was just permission to be destroyed. The plaza was magnificent in the September sunlight. Victoria arrived exactly on time, stepping out of a black town car in her red dress. She could feel eyes on her as she walked through the lobby. The ceremony was in the terrace room, decorated in white and gold. Autumn's choices, obviously. Blake had always preferred simpler aesthetics. Victoria took a seat in the back row, crossing her legs and waited. The room filled slowly. She recognized faces, business associates, Blake's family, Autumn's extensive social circle. Blake's brother saw her and did a double take, then hurried away like she was contagious. Good. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them wonder why she was here. Let them whisper. The ceremony started precisely at 2. Blake walked out first, standing at the altar with his best man. He looked good, tanned, fit, wearing a custom tuxedo that probably cost $10,000. Her money, she thought. He'd bought that with her money. Then he saw her. His face went white. He actually stumbled, catching himself on the altar rail. The officiant asked if he was all right. Blake nodded but couldn't look away from Victoria. She smiled at him. A small, private smile that said, I know everything. Then Autumn appeared, and Victoria had to admit the woman was beautiful. Blonde, young, wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. She practically floated down the aisle, glowing with triumph. She hadn't seen Victoria yet. She only had eyes for Blake, for the life she thought she was claiming. The officiant began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. The doors at the back of the room opened. 6 federal agents in dark suits walked in, followed by NYPD officers. The lead agent, a woman with steel gray hair named Morrison, walked straight down the aisle. The room went silent except for Autumn's gasp. Blake Hammond, Morrison said clearly, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. Blake's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees as Morrison cuffed him. Autumn started screaming, a high-pitched sound of disbelief. What is this? This is our wedding. You can't. Autumn Sinclair, another agent said, moving toward her. You're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and accessory to identity theft. The room exploded. Guests stood, shouting questions. Autumn's father tried to rush forward and was blocked by officers. Autumn was sobbing, mascara running down her face, her beautiful dress crumpling as they cuffed her hands behind her back. Blake finally found his voice. Victoria, Victoria, please. We can talk about this. We can... She stood and walked down the aisle toward him. Every eye in the room was on her. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the terror in his eyes, and spoke quietly so only he could hear. You thought you were so clever, Blake. Stealing from me, stealing from our clients, hiding money in a bank where you thought you had protection. She leaned in closer. But you forgot who taught you how to read financial statements. You forgot who built the system you tried to exploit. And you definitely forgot to check who owned Sterling Vale Bank before you transferred $800 million into accounts there. His face went from white to gray. No, you couldn't have. I bought it 3 days before you sent that text message, she said. Every transaction you made, I saw it. Every forged signature, I documented it. Every single crime you and your beautiful bride committed, I handed it to the FBI with a bow on top. She straightened. You divorced me by text message and thought I'd just disappear. You thought I'd be destroyed. But Blake, she smiled, you just gave me the motivation I needed to stop being nice. Morrison was pulling him to his feet. Blake was babbling now, trying to explain, trying to justify. Autumn was still screaming. The guests were recording everything on their phones. This would be all over social media within the hour. Victoria turned and walked back down the aisle, her heels clicking on marble. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back. Oh, and Blake, she called out. The apartment you gave me in the divorce? I sold it. The car? Donated it. The $50,000? She laughed. I gave it to a women's shelter that helps people escape from abusive relationships. I kept nothing from you. Everything I have now? She gestured around the chaos. I earned myself, which is more than you can say. She walked out into the September sunshine, pulling out her phone. 23 missed calls, 40 texts. Patricia's was on top. I'm watching the news. You magnificent, terrifying woman. Drinks? Victoria typed back. Champagne, the expensive stuff. I'm celebrating. She slid into her town car and leaned back against the leather seat. Behind her, she could hear shouting, sirens, the sound of a wedding that would never be completed. She thought about Blake's face when he'd seen her, about Autumn's screams, about the justice of it all. She thought about the girl who'd bid on a painting 23 years ago and the woman she'd become. Where to? The driver asked. Sterling Vale Bank headquarters, she said. I have work to do. The car pulled away from the plaza, leaving the wreckage behind. Victoria looked out the window at the city she'd conquered, the life she'd rebuilt, the future she'd claimed back. Blake had tried to destroy her with a text message and an empty bank account, but he'd forgotten the most important thing about Victoria Hammond. She'd never needed him to be powerful. She'd always been the one with the vision, the intelligence, the strength. He'd just been lucky enough to stand beside her. Now he'd learned what it meant to stand against her. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She considered ignoring it, then answered. Victoria Hammond. Ms. Hammond, this is Richard Sinclair. Autumn's father's voice was shaking. Please, my daughter made a mistake. She's young. She didn't understand what she was doing. Blake manipulated her. If you could just speak to the prosecutors, explain. Mr. Sinclair, Victoria interrupted, her voice ice cold. Your daughter didn't make a mistake. She made a choice. She chose to sleep with a married man. She chose to help him steal from his clients. She chose to humiliate me by posting photos of the ring he bought with my money. She chose to send me a wedding invitation to rub my face in her victory. These weren't mistakes. These were deliberate acts by a woman who thought she could take whatever she wanted without consequences. She paused. Now she's learning that actions have consequences. We all are. But the wedding should have happened in 6 to 8 years, after they both served their federal prison sentences. Tell your daughter I said congratulations on her special day. I hope the memories last a lifetime. She hung up. The car glided through Manhattan traffic. Victoria opened her tablet and began reviewing reports from Sterling Vale. The bank was recovering beautifully under new leadership. Customer confidence was up. They'd just been approached by a major investment firm about a potential partnership. By next quarter, they'd be profitable. By next year, they'd be one of the most respected regional banks in the country. She'd built all of this in 6 months. She'd taken her worst day and turned it into a launching point for something bigger than anything she and Blake had created together. She'd learned that she didn't need a partner to be successful. She just needed to believe in herself. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mother. Victoria Marie Hammond. The news is saying Blake was arrested at his wedding. Please tell me you weren't there. I was there, Mama. A long sigh. Oh, baby. I'm fine, better than fine. I'm free. Victoria surprised herself by meaning it. For the first time in years, I'm actually free. No more wondering if he's lying. No more trying to ignore my gut. No more making myself smaller so he can feel bigger. I'm done with all of that. What are you going to do now? Victoria looked out at the city, at the possibilities stretching before her. Everything, she said. I'm going to do everything I was too afraid to do before. I'm going to expand Sterling Vale nationally. I'm going to start that investment fund I always talked about. I'm going to travel, really travel, not just business trips. I'm going to live, Mama. And I'm going to do it on my own terms. I'm proud of you, honey. Your daddy would be proud too. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes for the first time all day. I wish he was here. He is, baby. He's always been with you. You got his stubbornness and his sense of justice. That man never let anyone push him around, and neither will you. Her mother paused. Come home for Thanksgiving? Your brother wants to see you. I'll be there, Victoria promised. I'll bring champagne. She hung up as the car pulled up to Sterling Vale's headquarters, a gleaming building in Midtown. Her building now, her company, her future. She got out, smoothing her red dress, and walked through the glass doors. Employees smiled at her, some giving her subtle thumbs up. Word had already spread. She'd gone to her ex-husband's wedding and watched him get arrested. She'd become a legend in under 3 hours. She took the elevator to the top floor, to her office with its view of the entire city. She poured herself a glass of water and stood at the window, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The pain of the miscarriages that Blake had never truly supported her through, the loneliness of a marriage where she'd done all the emotional labor, the betrayal of discovering not just infidelity, but theft, fraud, and calculated cruelty. The hollow feeling of signing divorce papers that gave her almost nothing. The rage that had fueled her investigation. The satisfaction of watching justice served. And underneath it all, a strange sense of gratitude. Because Blake divorcing her by text message had set her free in ways she'd never imagined. It had forced her to remember who she was without him. It had reminded her that she was the architect of her own success, that she'd never needed his charm or his connections. She'd needed her own brilliance, her own instincts, her own determination. He'd tried to take everything from her, but he'd actually given her the greatest gift. He'd shown her that she was capable of rebuilding from nothing and creating something even better than before. Her desk phone rang. It was Patricia. Are you sitting down? Should I be? The DA's office just called. They want you to testify at the trial. They're saying this could be one of the biggest financial fraud cases in New York in the last decade. Blake and Autumn could be looking at 20 years minimum, especially with the forged signatures and client theft. And Tori? They're talking about book deals, movie rights. Your story is everywhere. You're trending on 3 different platforms. Victoria sat down slowly. I don't want to be famous for this. You're not famous for what he did to you. You're famous for what you did next. There's a difference. Patricia paused. You're a symbol now. Every woman who's been betrayed, who's been underestimated, who's been told she's nothing without her partner, they're all watching you. You showed them it's possible to come back stronger. I just did what needed to be done. Exactly. And that's why it matters. Patricia's voice softened. How are you really? Under all the armor and the victory, how are you? Victoria thought about it. She thought about the nights she'd cried herself to sleep. The mornings she'd forced herself out of bed through pure spite. The moments when she'd wondered if she'd ever feel whole again. The slow, painful process of rebuilding trust in her own judgment. I'm tired, she admitted. And I'm sad. 23 years is a long time to invest in someone, even if they didn't deserve it. But Patricia, I'm also proud. I'm proud that I didn't let him break me. I'm proud that I chose justice over revenge. Because revenge would have been personal and petty. But justice? Justice helps everyone he hurt. And I'm proud that I'm still standing. You're not just standing, my friend. You're soaring. After they hung up, Victoria opened her laptop and began drafting an email to Sterling Vale's board of directors. They discussed the expansion plans at next week's meeting. She had ideas for community lending programs, small business initiatives, scholarship funds. She'd use the platform Blake's crimes had inadvertently given her to do good, real good, for people who needed it. That would be her legacy, not the spectacular downfall of her ex-husband. The sun set over Manhattan, painting her office in gold light. Victoria worked through the evening, through the calls from reporters she declined, through the text messages from old friends expressing shock and support. She worked because work made sense, because building something made her feel alive in ways the marriage never had. She worked because she finally understood that she didn't need anyone's permission to be brilliant. She just needed to stop apologizing for it. At midnight, she finally locked her computer and stood to leave. Her phone buzzed one more time, a news alert. Blake Hammond and Autumn Sinclair denied bail, considered flight risks due to offshore accounts and international connections. Trial set for January. She read it twice, then deleted it. That was their story now, not hers. She walked to the elevator, rode down to the lobby, and stepped out into the cool September night. The city was alive around her. Lights blazing, people laughing, life continuing in its chaotic, beautiful way. She'd survived something that should have destroyed her. She'd turned her worst nightmare into her greatest triumph. And tomorrow she'd wake up and do it all again, building the life she'd always deserved but had been too afraid to claim. Victoria Hammond hailed a cab and gave her address. As the city blurred past the windows, she thought about signs and fate and the strange paths life takes. 23 years ago, she'd met a man at an auction and thought it was destiny. Now she understood that destiny wasn't about finding the right person. It was about becoming the right person, the one who could stand alone and still cast a shadow. Blake had divorced her by text message and thought he was ending her story. Instead, he'd just given her the chance to write a better one. And she'd make damn sure it had a happy ending. Not because of revenge, not because of his punishment, but because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. The only person who could truly break Victoria Hammond was Victoria Hammond herself. And she refused to break. She refused to even bend. She'd built herself a fortress out of her own bones. And it was magnificent.